Buckle up and lock in, because we're about to dive right into my list of top 5 characters in Wuthering Waves. That is, if you are a beginner player, who should you pull to make your account the best that it can possibly be? Now, I'm going to make this list for 5-star characters only. If you want a list of the 4-star characters, let me know in a comment and I'll consider making that video in the future. Now, before I get into this list, I need to set a few ground rules in order to keep my own sanity and in order to make sure that everybody is on the same page. And hey, if this is your first time coming by my channel, thanks for stopping by. My name is Solace. If you like Wuthering Waves content, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Okay, so for the first ground rule, even though I think my list is valid and I believe that everything I'm about to tell you is useful information, at the end of the day, I am just a guy yapping on the internet.
Don't take life too seriously.
These are mostly just my own opinions. I will say this though, as of right now, I do own every single character in the entire game except for Encore. And I have played enough of Encore through her companion quest, the Elusive Realm, and other events in order to know how to play her well enough in order to consider her for this list. I did not consult any other online tier lists or watch any other videos in preparation for this video. I am making this purely from my own knowledge. Second ground rule. If your favorite character is not on this list, that does not mean that the character is bad. In fact, every single character in Wuthering Waves is viable, even the 4-star characters. You do not have to listen to anything that I say, and above all else, I would recommend that you pull for who you want, without worrying who is the best. Trust me, you can go based on my list or somebody else's list and pull characters based on that, and it will be a complete waste of your time and resources, and it will mean absolutely nothing if you don't enjoy the characters that you pulled. And that brings me to my third ground rule, which is that I'm making this game from the stance of a beginner player, which I mentioned at the very beginning of the video. So if you just started and you don't know anything, which characters are the best for you to pull? This actually makes my job easier, because as a beginner player, you really only need to hone in on 2 things, and that is doing big damage and keeping that damage dealer alive. So a lot of the focus on the list is going to be on main DPS characters, and part of the calculus that I do in my head to figure out who goes on the list really comes down to 2 things. How easy are they to play, and how easy is it to build a team based around them relative to their damage numbers. I also won't be considering resonance sequences in this video, meaning that all characters are being considered with you only having a single copy of them. And lastly, I am only covering characters that have either been officially released or they have been playable in game for us to be able to see their kit. I will not now, nor will I ever cover leaks. That means that for this video, Rochia was the last character that was considered. Phoebe and Brant were not considered. And I'll go ahead and let you guys know now, I was part of the closed beta for version 2.0, so I got to see Rochia's gameplay extensively already, and she did not make the top 5. This is not because she's bad, she's actually very, very good, but her main role is not going to be as a main DPS for the typical player. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's dive right into the list, starting with number 5, which is Verena. Verena is the only character on my list that is from the standard 5-star banner, and she is a character that should be on every single player's account. This is because when you start the game, you get to choose a character completely for free from the 5-star standard banner via a voucher that they send to your in-game mail. If you don't get lucky and get a random copy of Verena from the standard beginner's convene, which is that banner that you get that is the first 50 pulls, I would recommend that you use your choice voucher to choose Verena. Verena is very easy to play, and as far as team building is concerned, you don't really have to worry about that, because at the beginning, she's going to be on every single team that you make. And the reason for that is because at the time of this recording, she is one of only 3 healers that exist in the game. She is a significant step up over the 4-star healer, Baija, so when you're first starting out, be prepared to have Verena in your teams for the foreseeable future. That is until you manage to pick up number 4 on my list, which is Shorekeeper. Shorekeeper was the 3rd healer that was added to the game, and right now she is the best choice for almost every single team in the game. And if you're wondering why I have 2 healers on the list, the the reason is because there is a endgame mode called the Tower of Adversity, where ideally you'll want to have 3 fully built teams in order to clear the content as efficiently as possible. 3 fully built teams equals 3 fully built healers. Now there are some semantics to be discussed there, mainly that you don't really need 3 healers in order to complete the Tower of Adversity's content, but the end goal regardless is going to be that eventually you're going to want to have 3 teams and you're going to want to have 3 fully built healers. And Shorekeeper right now is the best healer that we have, and she arguably might be one of the best healers that we have for quite some time. Not only is she exceptional at healing, she also buffs your main DPS for an extra 15% crit rate and 25% crit damage, and she also gives a flat 15% damage buff to your entire team. Now, I didn't mention this before, but Verena also gives a flat 15% damage buff to your team, but she does not do anything for the crit rate and crit damage. For team building though, it's basically the same as Verena. She's going to be on pretty much every team that you make, and she will replace Verena in most teams. But you will almost certainly have access to Verena first, and should use her until you're able to catch Shorekeeper on a rerun banner. Now, with those 2 out of the way, the remaining 3 characters on this list are going to be main DPS characters. And actually, I'm going to give you 5 instead of 3. And I'll explain why when I get there. Well, one of them is actually not a main DPS, but again, I'll explain when I get there. Here's the thing that I want everybody to understand though. You could probably take all of the characters that I'm about to talk about and make an argument for why this one should be number 1 or this one should be number 3 or just whatever. They are all very strong and viable. I'll talk about why I think each character deserves the spot that I give them, but honestly, you're not going to go wrong with any of these characters, so don't put too much stock into the order that I've put them in. In fact, you should know that I personally struggled a little bit when I was making the list, and I even moved them around back and forth a few times before settling on the order to put them in. So hey, if one of these characters really speaks to you and you really like them for whatever reason, I say 100% go for that character. And that brings us to number 3 on my list, Camellia. Now, it hurt me a little bit to put Camellia at number 3 because she's probably my favorite character in the entire game right now, but it is what it is. Camellia is incredibly strong with both single target and AoE damage and has a huge nuke that will put big numbers up on your screen. The reason that I put her at number 3 and she's not higher is because the skill ceiling for playing her is a little bit more difficult. She has this spin attack that she does, and apparently a lot of people have issues with that sometimes, like getting interrupted and knocked down. I think her spin attack personally is great because it's really easy to counter most enemies with it because of the amount of hits that it does. But yeah, just know that a lot of people think that she's a little bit more difficult to play, but if you do manage to get her and you enjoy her playstyle, you're going to be doing some huge damage, and she is a ton of fun. Now, this brings me to one of the extra characters that I wanted to talk about here with an honorable mention, because it was almost a tie for the number 3 spot, and I felt like I at least had to mention this character, which is Shanli Yao. Now, if you've been playing Wuthering Waves since version 1.2, you will have received a copy of him for free from one of the events, but if you think that he's not as good just because he was given out for free, you would be very wrong. The community was actually very shocked at how strong he is. Truly another big Kuro Games W moment. So Shanli Yao is easier to play than Camellia, and he has this really cool ability to slow down time, which is sometimes very useful. But here's the reason why I put Camellia at number 3 and not Shanli Yao. Shanli Yao's best team requires Yinlin as the sub DPS, and Yinlin is another 5-star character. On the other hand, Camellia's best team in the game uses Sanhua as a sub DPS, and she is a 4-star character that everybody gets for free just by logging into the game. Now, Rochia did just come out, and I haven't seen the numbers yet, but like I said, I did play the version 2.0 closed beta, and I talked with several people who also played the closed beta, and I'll have to check and see if Maggie has put a video out already explaining the numbers, but the consensus seems to be right now that Rochia is not that big of an upgrade upgrade as a support for Camellia over Sanhua, especially if you have Sanhua S6. At S6, Sanhua gives another 20% damage buff to your entire team for 20 seconds. So I'm not really sure who the best support is going to be 100%. It could be Sanhua, it could be Rochia, but even if Rochia is better, I'm willing to bet that it's not that big of a deal. You would probably still be just fine with Sanhua. And like I said, everybody gets her for free. So because of how easy it is to build a team around Camellia, I gave her the number 3 spot. But if you like Shan Liao and his playstyle, he is still a fantastic choice if you want to pull him. So let's talk about my choice for number 2, which is the one and only Carlotta Montelli. Carlotta is actually really close to being my favorite character in the game, but it really just comes down to 2 things, which is her character design and her voice actress. Her English voice actress is Jennifer English, which, if you don't know, that is the same voice actress as Shadowheart from Baldur's Gate 3. And in my opinion, she has the best voice acting in the entire game, and it is not even close.
I alone will decide whether it's for show or for battle.
Now, Carlotta, as it stands, may also be the highest single target damage dealer in the game, and in regard to that, she may actually be in competition with my number 1 pick, but I'll leave it to the math people for that. Regardless, she is very, very strong, and she's definitely one of the best DPS characters that you can pick up in the game. Whenever her rerun banner comes around, if you have enough Astri, I 100% recommend picking her up if you're in need of a main DPS. And the only reason that she's my number 2 pick instead of my number 1 pick is because Carlotta is a little bit more difficult to play than my number 1 pick, which can be none other than Jinshi, the magistrate of Jinzhou herself. Now, because of the way that gacha games are in general, I think that the Magistrates and Wuthering Waves are always going to be a cut above most of the other 5-star characters, at least by some metrics. And right now, Jinshi is definitely owning up to that. She is incredibly strong. However, the reason that I chose her as my number 1 pick over Carlotta is because of how easy she is to play. And by that, I'm not saying that Carlotta is super difficult to play, but it's just that with Jinshi, it's kind of like you press button, watch everything melt, and have a ton of fun while doing it. In the current state of the game, if you need a really strong DPS and you don't have one, Jinshi would be my number 1 recommendation to any new player for a must-pull character. Now, you guys may have noticed that I didn't mention team building for either Jinshi or Carlotta, and that's because I didn't take it too much into account for the 2 of them specifically, because for both of them, their best sub-DPS support character is going to be Zhezha, which is another 5-star character that I want to give an honorable mention to. Zhezha is also incredibly easy to play, and she slides perfectly into either team, so if you're trying to build the very best Carlotta team or Jinshi team, I would certainly consider pulling Zhezha as well if you can. So I know it is impossible to make everybody happy with lists like this, but please remember this is just my personal list. You can also check out what other creators have to say, check out some online tier lists as well, and remember that just because I didn't mention a character on this list doesn't mean that they're bad whatsoever. Also, let me know in the comments what other kinds of tier lists you might enjoy seeing in the future, and if you liked this one, do me a favor and just hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.